So when should you start learning a JavaScript framework? My answer to that is when you know how to build static and dynamic websites with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So the static website part's a no-brainer. You should be able to learn. You should be able to know how to create static websites. If you don't, then you have no. You should primarily focus on HTML and CSS. When it comes to more dynamic websites or web applications, I think you should know how to build a basic CRUD app with HTML, CSS in JavaScript. And CRUD, by the way, CRUD stands for C means creates, R means read, U means updates, and D means deletes. So knowing how to do that, I think is really beneficial. You don't really need to use a database, but it's also very beneficial. Not when it comes to going over and learning a framework, but just in general. And when it comes to JavaScript, just knowing the basics isn't really enough. So the basics would be, I would consider variables, functions, for loops, DOM manipulation, objects, so on and so forth. So those things I would consider basic, and I think you should learn more advanced JavaScript concepts like ECMAScript. So that is ES6, ES7, so on and so forth, but primarily ES6 since that is the most used, most popular. By the way, you can use all of them at once. It's just ES6 is the biggest one, the biggest one that you should learn. There's promises, async awaits, there's I hate this word, but prototypal inheritance, learning that, and then also higher order functions. So not only learning how to create them, but also using the array methods like map, there's for each, there's filter, there's reduce, there's flat map. There's a lot of them. I think there's maybe 12 or something like that, but learning those would be very beneficial. Going even further into JavaScript, it helps, in my opinion, it helps a lot to know some basic design patterns because that's what these frameworks use. They use design patterns to, create these to create these things. And there's three main ones. One is the module pattern, there's the observer pattern, and then there's the prototype pattern. And these three patterns will help you create more scalable and more maintainable code. I know for a fact that React uses the module pattern because it's basically aligns with what React entails and what it does, but I may be wrong. So if you know that, correct me on that. But there's also another pattern that's really, really good and it's been used forever, which is called MVC. And MVC is more of I would say a global thing, an architectural thing in a sense. And basically what it means is you're separating your code or your code base into three different concepts. So the first one, M, is modal. Modal is how you structure your data. V means view. View is basically whatever you see on your website or web app. That's the view. And then the controller is basically talking to the model in the view. So I think that's also very beneficial to know and learn, and just go ahead and create a basic application with JavaScript using those patterns. Start off with MVC and then use whatever design patterns you can use. So now going on to the next tip. You should get into JavaScript frameworks when you are ready to build larger applications more efficiently. If you already know how to build a big web application, then that's a signal to go on to frameworks to learn how to make those same web applications more efficiently, because that's what these frameworks are meant to do. That makes developers more efficient and less prone to doing less prone to just spending time. It makes developers a lot more efficient. Now, when getting into a framework, my biggest piece of advice would be to go slow and learn the framework bit by bit. There's a lot of cases where people would see features or use features from a framework and think that it's specifically thinks that the framework is doing it, but in reality, there's a lot of cases where people would use a feature from a framework thinking that it's the framework doing that feature, but in reality it's JavaScript. So the biggest example is with map, and then also concepts in general. So like states, for example, in React, I made the mistake that state was specific to React, when in reality, state is a general concept in the programming world. And what state means is that it's basically data or data that can be mutated. So you kind of like keep that contained by itself, and you keep it as minimal as possible, and only add another piece of states if you absolutely need it. So there's that. Going back into JavaScript, it's very good to learn JavaScript to the teeth, because it not only makes you more language agnostic, it makes you framework agnostic. So by learning, because all of these frameworks are basically JavaScript. It's all JavaScript, and if you learn the JavaScript language more and more, it makes you more framework agnostic. You can just switch between frameworks like it's nothing, learn a little bit of the basics, and you're good. So like if your work prefers React and at home you prefer like Angular or Vue, you can easily switch between the two. At work you can work in React, and at home you could work with Angular, no problems. Just learn the basics of the framework, and you're good. Whenever you get stuck when working on something, you instantly know what you need, and then you go and see if you find that in the framework, and then pull that and continue on. So that's pretty much all I have for this topic. If you like the video, consider giving it a like, subscribing, or sharing the video, whichever you prefer. I would appreciate, and I will see you in the next video.